Good morning, good afternoon. It is noon here on a beautiful Thursday here in Mobile, Alabama, and we are back for Season 5 of Claims Corner. It's really hard to believe it has been 5 years since we started doing this, and we are back live, Episode 1. Excited to be back. This is fun.
Yeah, it has been a long time. Like I said, it's been a long time. We've been doing this broadcast, and we're obviously glad to start it back up this year.
Yeah, and this year we started a new format. So last year I think it was just you came and gone. Now we're doing a new format on YouTube at our CNC and Catastrophe National Claims channel. So in order to participate, and when you have to subscribe to YouTube, and then you click that little bell in the top corner right there next to your little bell. Click that. That's going to give you, each time we go live, each time we post anything, each time we put anything on our YouTube channel, you go right there and get notifications of it.
Yep.
Also, the benefit of subscribing to our YouTube channel, CNC Catastrophe National Claims, is you also, on top of that, be able to participate in these live Claims Corner.
Yep.
Questions, answers, be able to put comments in there, stuff like that. So we will be able to answer those at the end of our sessions each end of our webinar. So, got a kind of a new group today. We have somebody that's joined us on here. If you don't know who I am, my name is Craig Fowler. I am the Chief Claims Officer here at CNC. And like I said, we've started this 5 years ago, and it's crazy. We're in our booth. We started our booth a couple years ago doing this, but before that, during COVID, we were sitting down at a computer, and it was like the first time when Zoom was not even cool yet. We were using Zoom,
Yep.
and we were doing these Flood News at noon, and it has evolved each and every year into what we see now. And each year, I think we just continuously add to not only the speakers and the presenters and the people that join us, but the overall format, and then we add host each year. And so one of our hosts that you'll see in and out throughout the year, me, obviously.
All right, I am Mary Berry, the property claims trainer here at CNC, and this is my first episode, so I'm excited to be here on a platform that just keeps growing and getting better. So just look for me in the next couple of episodes. I'll be here on and off sometimes, co-hosting, helping out, and just glad to be a part of the team.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I know we're super excited to have her, too. My name is Murphy Buggs. I'm the property training manager here at CNC. Obviously, super excited to be back. Last year, I did get to co-host a little bit with Craig, so I was super thankful for that. And obviously, it's evolved more into this year, as well as our other broadcasts and other podcasts that we have out there on our YouTube channel that you can take a look at as well. So we do want to do a little bit of housekeeping first and give you an announcement. We will be at the Elevate 2024 conference next week in Salt Lake City, Utah. So that'll be from the 10th through the 14th, I believe, is when we will be there. So there's going to be a lot of great classes. We're trying to stay up to date, obviously, on all of the Verisk products from Xactimate to Claim Experience, Exact Analysis, and even further, and obviously incorporating that into our training program. So we are very excited about that, and we look forward to seeing you if you are also going to be out there. So let's go ahead and jump into it.
And let me say one thing about Verisk.
Go ahead.
I'm on a panel, so
He
I get
is.
to be on a panel, so I get to talk about some good and exciting things. So I'm looking forward to that as well, to get some insight. But we're also having those other meetings as well, so we can take this information and we can bring it back to our adjusters who are on a roster and everything that's associated with that. So that's good.
Exactly right.
All right, so Episode 1, we are back. And a lot of times we have our Dr. Hal Needham, Hurricane Hal, if you call him Hal, just Hurricane Hal. We have him on usually every season, Episode 1. We bring him on, and the first thing we want to talk about is what is going to happen this season in the hurricane forecast and the storms and what are we taking place. And we were going to do that again this year, but we decided, we got a better topic, I think, because Hal has been involved in this project. He's been running around the world pretty much. And involved in this project called GeoTrek. And today, in the topic today, really, or the episode today, is Happy Third Birthday GeoTrek. And it's basically a look back at the top 10 experiences Hal has gone through. And so, but Hal, before we get to that, what's going to happen this hurricane season? What are we seeing right now? What is the very, very early forecast? And I know we don't want to spoil it too much because you and I and Dr. Phil Koblotkin had a sit down during the our CNC Connect conference, and we're going to broadcast that later on one of these episodes. So we don't want to take too much thunder away from that. But yeah, just tell us briefly, maybe in one word or less. Well, you can't do less, right? Yeah. In one word,
Well,
see
hey,
if you can say it.
Yeah, good afternoon, Craig, Mary, and Murphy. Thank you for a warm introduction. Great to see y'all, and I'm so excited for a new season here of Claims Corner. Yeah, Craig, everyone's asking, are we going to see a really active hurricane season again this year? Last year was the 4th busiest season on record in terms of named storms, and I've done an even better thing, Craig. I've embedded kind of an outlook on what we could expect this season into my presentation. It's hidden somewhere. Think of it as an Easter egg hunt. You will find it somewhere in the presentation today. So that'll just keep people on their toes. But we'll be talking in this presentation about the top 10 experiences in GeoTrek. But along the way, we will touch on what we can expect possibly this hurricane season moving forward.
So we need to pay attention.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not just going to tell you, but I'll just give you a little hint. It looks like it may be quite active, and I'll explain why somewhere in the presentation.
Somewhere. Yeah. Okay, well, good to know. I mean, when you get on, you present and you talk. I mean, we had this conversation. We all pay attention because you're just so dynamic in the way you present things, and it's always good to have you on. So I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're able to join us again for episode 1 of season 5. So let's get into the top 10. But you know what? One of the things I want to do before we get in the top 10, I'm going to talk about is tell us about, if you can, or if it's in your presentation as well, what is GeoTrek? How did you get started with GeoTrek, and really what was the reasoning behind starting GeoTrek?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, GeoTrek, really, we explore the world looking for stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. We found when there's a natural disaster or extreme weather event, a lot of times the media is there for a day or two to just cover the sensational damage, and then they move on. They miss some of these deeper stories, like lessons learned and success stories. How can we build better to reduce losses? Things like this are really missed by the mainstream media. So that's really how GeoTrek got started out. We thought there are a lot of stories that are untold that can help us understand the people impacted by extreme weather and some measures we can take to better prepare for extremes in the future.
So the media comes and goes, basically. They jump in, they get the sensational shots, they get the ones that are probably going to sell, because everybody likes to see destruction, but you do the human element side of things and talk about it in terms of how people are affected. That's interesting how that has grown. And how many seasons are we at now?
I think this is the 5th season here of Claims Corner / what used to be Flood News at Noon, and this will be my 6th season with CNC. Can you believe it? So time flies by. I've been having a lot of fun, and it's always been great to work with y'all on these fun projects.
Absolutely. So GeoTrek. So if anybody wants to listen in and catch up some of your podcasts, where do they find you at?
Yeah, so you can go to geo-trek.com, so geo-trek.com, or you can really listen to our podcast. Our podcast really brings together some of the heaviest hitting news in disaster science and extreme weather. You can find our GeoTrek podcast wherever your favorite podcast platform, wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or another platform.
Cool. Good to know. It's funny. I asked him a question and said, how long have you been doing this for GeoTrek? Well, the title is Happy 3rd Birthday.
There you go.
Hello.
Yeah, that's right.
Hello, Craig.
So GeoTrek, yeah, 3 years now we've been doing GeoTrek. That's right.
GeoTrek. Yeah. So a question now, and we're going to hit your top 10. Been doing this for 3 years. How many episodes are y'all into? How many episodes is GeoTrek into?
Next week will be the 88th episode of the GeoTrek podcast. And last year, FeedSpot, actually, we were moving up in the rankings. We were ranked as the #1 podcast in the topic of natural disasters. So we're just always getting out there into disasters, but also bringing a lot of experts on the show as well.
That is awesome to hear. Well, I just heard you said all experts on the show. Have you been on the show, Murphy?
I was on there once.
Really? See, I've never been
invited. We did a whole episode.
I've never been invited. I've never been invited. So we need to slash that expert.
You're on the 4th birthday.
Yeah, I'm on the 4th birthday. Oh,
yeah, there
fantastic. You go. All right. So out of all these episodes, you picked a top 10. So how difficult was it to pick the top 10?
Great question. It was a lot easier than I thought. There are really events where we end up on the ground interacting with storm survivors, or we're seeing something happen with a natural disaster or extreme weather that no one would expect. Those are the ones that for me are the most memorable and move to the top. So really, I think you'll enjoy all top 10, but you'll probably see as we move along the list, some of these, especially in the top 5, are really extraordinary stories.
All right, let's hit it. Let's start.
Let's go.
Well, thanks, y'all. Let's do it. I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll rock and roll. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. We're here at the 3rd birthday of GeoTrek, looking back at the top 10 experiences. Like we said, we cover stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. Another way you can put it is we're changing how people view and prepare for extreme weather. You can see us on the web there at geotrek.com. Y'all, we're just going to jump right into it. The top 10 list, top 10 experiences I've had in my 3 years with GeoTrek. Number 10 is something we call ClimaGuard. This is fascinating and you're going to love it. So this really is born out of Hurricane Harvey in 2017, a tremendous rainstorm, the wettest tropical system to ever move ashore in the U.S., dumped more than 50 inches of rain in parts of Metro Houston. We know about the hundreds of thousands of buildings that were impacted, but did you know that Hurricane Harvey flooded up to 500,000 cars? That's coming out of the National Hurricane Center report from 2018. Look at this photograph from the report. This is a Texas World Speedway after Hurricane Harvey. Those are all cars, thousands and thousands of cars in one place. Again, there were so many flooded cars, we didn't know where to put them. Well, out of the storm zone and out of the wreckage of this terrible catastrophe stepped an entrepreneur, an innovator named Rahel Abraham. She and her whole family was impacted by the flood. They lost their vehicles, and she said there has to be a better way to protect vehicles from flood damage. And so she launched something called ClimaGuard. It's a waterproof bag that actually zips around your car and protects your car from flooding. It only costs $400. So it's cheaper than most people's deductible for a flooded car. And then you don't lose your car and you don't have to go in the market where you're probably going to buy maybe a flooded out used car. ClimaGuard actually fits in your trunk, and you can have this with you if you live in a flood-prone area. It's an amazing innovation. If you want to hear more about it, check out GeoTrek podcast number 73. Rahel lives right up the road from me in Houston. I'm based in Galveston. Episode number 73, From Flood Victim to Innovator, Rahel Abraham and ClimaGuard. What I loved about this story was here was a disaster victim who said, hey, we can do better. I want to innovate a way to protect my community, build a product, and then export that to protect other people around the world. So that's my number 10 experience. Like I told you, we're going to go fast through these. This is a very fast presentation. So let's move on now to number 9. If you have questions about any of these top 10 experiences, we're going to do, I think, the top 7, take a little break. Then we're going to do the last 3. And at the end, we're going to open it up for Q&A. Experience number 9, the sinkhole that gobbled up 8 Corvettes. So in February of 2014, a lot of us woke up to news that a sinkhole had opened up and gobbled up 8 Corvettes. When I heard this news, I thought, I can't believe this. It must be a sinkhole underneath Craig Fowler's garage. I mean, who else has 8 Corvettes, right? Well, it turns out it actually was not under Craig's garage. It was at the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky. A sinkhole opened up in the pre-dawn hours and 8 Corvettes fell into the hole. Y'all, this story had everything. I mean, there's a natural disaster, there's a cultural element, and hey, if sports cars are involved, we're all interested. So I went up to the National Corvette Museum there in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I just had to learn more about this story. Well, it turns out that some of these Corvettes were actually restored and returned to the showroom, like this beauty here. But other ones, they were beyond repair. You get some of these cars were really messed up, like this one that was kind of crushed on the bottom of the sinkhole. So we might assume that they filled in the sinkhole and then rebuilt the museum on top of it. And that would be a false assumption because the sinkhole actually still exists today underneath the museum. And if you go to the showroom, it's pretty cool. You can actually see the outline of the sinkhole. There's also a cave underneath, and they have the outline for that as well. Not only can you see the outline, you can actually go up to special windows and look down into the sinkhole, if you can believe it. They have locked doors, so you can't go down, but you can see down. It was just an amazing experience knowing that this sinkhole is still under the National Corvette Museum. They have completely embraced this event. They've really embraced the science behind sinkholes, why they happen. They have a whole education exhibit that they've built. There are thousands of school students that come every year to learn more about the physical processes behind sinkholes. And what I really liked about this was they kind of took lemons and made lemonade, if you will. Their viewership online and their attendance to the museum absolutely exploded after this event. And so it's just interesting to me that some people are impacted by a catastrophe and they say, how can we turn this into something good? Their visitorship has exploded after this. They've embraced it, and they do a lot of science education. To summarize it real quick, sinkholes happen where we see a geological landscape called karst, K-A-R-S-T, where we have karst topography and karst landscapes. We have a lot of limestone. Water dissolves limestone, creating caverns and openings under the ground. This is where we see sinkholes. This is where we see caves. This map from the USGS puts a little red dot everywhere that we see a sinkhole hotspot. You see them there in Kentucky, in a lot of the Appalachians. You also see a lot of sinkholes in Florida and some out west as well in places like Idaho and the Pacific Northwest. So really interesting education. Again, they've embraced this, and they've also done it with some humor. So walking around the sinkhole exhibit there in the National Corvette Museum, you see some things like this. Still faster than your Mustang. They're having fun with this. This is one of the Corvettes that they pulled out from the bottom of the sinkhole and were able to restore. You see some other things like this. The devil there saying, thank you, God, for sending me a Corvette. They're having fun with this. They embraced it. And of course, we did a podcast on this, podcast number 59, one of our most popular, the sinkhole that gobbled up 8 Corvettes. Again, we love these stories where there's science involved, but there's a human element, and seeing how people, in this case, they actually engineered how you can stabilize a museum or a large facility on top of a cave or a sinkhole. So don't have time to get into that complex engineering on this podcast or on this broadcast, but you can listen to our podcast and hear more about how they did that at the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Moving right along.
All right, we're back. Looks like we lost Hal there. Maybe he was having an extreme weather event at his house or something.
Could
Maybe
be
lost
episode 89 in the works right now.
Maybe lost some internet or something there. So we're going to sit there and see if we can get him back. But I think we're so far into the number 8.
Yep.
The climate guard was really interesting. That's a pretty interesting concept.
Do you know about how much money you lost with all your Corvettes?
No, that was a different episode. That was a different episode. But you know what? I don't think I could use the climate guard bag to put on my Corvettes for that to happen. But I think I would be interested. If you're in an area where you have consistently a chance of flooding, $400 is not bad at all to have it just in case you get in a situation where you need that.
Yep.
But but at the same time, I could see somebody saying, "Oh, if I get this, then I can drive through water." Just like the guy. Y'all see the guy the other day surfing in his pickup truck?
Can't do that.
Yeah. No. So I don't think he could use a climate guard bag in that situation.
Not going to work.
Also, talking about the Corvettes, if you notice that newer model was completely destroyed. They could
the older model could be restored.
They could restore
I thought that was interesting as well.
I saw that. I was like, oh, yeah. It's interesting that is the situation.
Yeah.
Where you look at the quality of the items and you go, okay, that. But I wonder, that Cybertruck.
Yeah.
That's out there now. I wonder if that's something that, how really would that hold up in a sinkhole situation?
I don't know, because the way it's built, it's so bulky and it looks like a robot. I mean, I saw one at the airport, the last conference we went to in NACA, and I asked the guy, I was like, hey, can I take a picture of it? He's like, yeah, go right ahead. Everybody takes pictures. It was really cool, though. That's the first time I've ever seen one in person.
Yeah. All right, so I think Hal is having a little bit of internet issues. So, and that's that's the thing about going live.
Yeah,
you never know what you're going to run into.
Yeah,
you never know what's going to happen.
That's right.
I mean, it's just the way things are, and we experience that every day in everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to learn to see the issue, make an action plan, and move on for it.
Yeah, and resolve it. What's the saying? We are adjusters. We adjust.
So, absolutely. What number we want? We were just on 8, right?
He was starting 8. Yeah.
Okay.
He was starting number 8.
I don't even know what 8's about. So, But I wonder, the one curious where the one with Phil and Hal. Wonder where that one is. I bet that's number 1.
Place your bets. I'm going to say it's 3.
I think it's 3.
I think it's 3 because I know he's got a
gonna
couple
say-
really good ones.
So
So
I'll say 6.
6.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're probably going to say the one with you in it's probably number 1, right?
No.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're like,
I don't have any
number 1.
inside info.
So I see Hal. I see him there. I don't know if he can hear us yet. So we're gonna jump in. Hal, you good? Yeah, he's still having looks like a little bit of internet issue. So yeah, we're getting back on.
That's okay.
So, yeah, so I bet you're if he puts you number 1, I'm microphone's gonna be table's gonna be knocked over. Like I'm done. I'm done with this. We're walking out. So.
As fun as it was, I don't know that it would make the top 10 most interesting podcasts, but it was a lot of fun for me to do. I really enjoyed it. We did it in this room.
So we got a couple of questions here that are popping up. So we're gonna answer some of these questions. Then we're gonna pop these in for later on. But we're gonna go ahead and answer these. One of the questions came up is: has a climate guard been tested in deep water? Somebody's trying to connect it. So sorry. Has climate guard been tested in deep water? I don't know the answer to that. I would not be the one who would try to test it either.
No, I wouldn't be either.
I mean, like the guy surfing in his car.
Yeah.
Maybe he could try it since he seemed to not care about his truck. I think that's probably more one of those that the water gets up to a certain height, maybe a foot or two, which, if you start getting water into an automobile around a foot, you get all the electronics, all the wiring, everything in there, the computer systems, the ABS brakes, everything. I mean,
especially if
like
the engine's on. If it hits the engine, the engine's on, locked up, you're in big trouble there.
But I mean, it's just like that old Corvette that restored.
Yeah.
That probably could take on much more deeper water because it was. You don't have all these electronics in there. You don't have these components.
That's right. That's right. That would make sense.
And now everything's wired. There's cabling. So you get a situation. I'd say a couple of feet of water, and maybe this climate guard protects you from that. Versus you get a couple inches of water in your car. It's probably a total loss.
Probably
because of the wiring, because everything involved in it.
The electrical system is definitely something that's very expensive, but it fails quicker when you run into situations like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, another question: do you have any opinions on earthquakes, middle central United States? That's probably going to have to be a question for Hal. I know when we were looking, he was showing us that map of the sinkholes.
the karst map. Yeah.
One of the first, I went to one of them in the middle, and it was right there in Oklahoma. And the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, I wonder if that's a result of all this fracking they do in there, or is that a natural occurrence that is there already? Because when we do our California Earthquake Authority training, it's really an Earthquake Authority training. California's part of the Earthquake Authority training. But it's amazing when you look at a shake map and you look at a map where the USGS posts where earthquakes are. You have obviously California, Oregon, Alaska, Hawaii, all those the normal areas where you think there's going to be an earthquake. Then you have Oklahoma. You have that area, that's a pocket. And you have the New Madrid area, that's a pocket. Shockingly, there's a pocket on the East Coast over there near the Carolinas. That's red. That commonly gets earthquakes. I don't think they're nothing major, but it's still. But I wonder if. We're talking about the earthquakes in the central U.S. And I wonder if it's a combination of some of these sinkholes and the fracking and everything else that happens as a result of the earth shaking, the ground movement.
You would think.
So
1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So is it a truly natural cause, or is it something else that's helping contribute to this?
Could be.
So
Could be.
So that's definitely an interesting. And by the way, if you looking for some of our training that we do. Obviously, we do a lot of face-to-face. We do a lot of webinars. These podcasts, Murphy does a new adjuster podcast for new adjusters. I think you've been on there too.
I've been on
Yep.
there.
Mary's been on there.
And actually, I've been a guest
Yep,
on that
you've
one.
been a
So I'm
guest on
excited. So if you're interested in training, we do those podcasts. Plus, we have CNC Pro, which is our learning management system, where you register with us, you get into CNC Pro. But we do have our earthquake class in there. We have our CEA class in there. That's pretty new. I'm glad to have it out. I'm glad to have it on there and stuff like that. But if you're looking to get some earthquake training, that's on there as well.
Yeah.
ready. He's ready
Is
to
he
go.
back?
I think Hal's good.
How?
Hey, y'all, I apologize for the tech difficulties. Can y'all hear me?
Yep,
We can
we
hear
gotcha.
you. I mean, you got to number 7,
8.
8. I'm sorry, and it must have been about me, and it was just
The feed just went down.
feed just went down. I was like, no, I can't take this anymore.
So it went down during the sinkhole one?
No, right after the sinkhole.
Right after the sinkhole.
Okay, so
Your
we
number-
got through the sinkholes. Well, that's great. That means we're starting up with New Mexico here. So sorry
Correct.
for that. I'm plugged in with an Ethernet cable. I thought our internet would be good, but sometimes these things happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So let's rock and roll. Can y'all see that screen? I'm just sharing it right now.
We can see.
Yes.
From number 8 here, my time in New Mexico.
We see Climate Guard right now. We see the number 10.
You do? Okay. One moment, please.
And we did have a question while you're popping through this. Maybe you can answer this. Has that ever been tested in deep water?
The Climate Guard. Yeah, that's a good question. I know it's becoming popular. It's something that we actually do want to test. But I don't know if it has been tested in deep or flowing water, really.
I would love to know how you get that on there, too.
Yeah.
Do you like
Okay,
drive,
I see
do you
where
like
we're
drive,
at.
Do you like
So,
drive into it?
Yeah.
Like you get your kids to hold it up, you
Yeah.
drive into it?
Yeah.
So, and by the way, that
Yeah, so here we
there
are
we
at
are.
experience number 8.
Yeah.
Can you see that okay?
Yep,
Yep,
we are
we're
good.
good.
And we saw the fire, so we're good in the headline.
Yeah, well, let's rock and roll. So, yeah, the big fires out in New Mexico in 2022, 2 years ago, it was a big event. And the concern there was, and I went out there, I saw really evidence of fire on the landscape and in the built environment. Also, a lot of human signs, literal signs on the landscape showing you that there were a lot of fires. When I was out there in mid to late June of that year, I did not actually encounter any active fires because they switched from fire to flood within a week, if you can believe it. I got out there late in the month, and there was not only a lot of rain, but a lot of flood watches. The concern with flooding rains moving in right after a fire is that once the vegetation has been burned, I was in this burn zone here, it does not take a lot of rain to just wash into these creeks and rivers and make them very swollen and very flood prone because all your vegetation is burned. So there was a lot of concern. A lot of people were putting out sandbags. The National Weather Service was all over this, doing very good messaging about the threat for not only flash floods, but also debris flows after you have heavy rains hitting fired areas that have burned and fire scars and things like that. I visited the University of New Mexico, and they talked about the New Mexico hazard cycle, where they go from drought to wildfire to flood. And this is something that has happened a lot in their state's history. A lot of times, especially in the winter to early mid-spring, even late spring, they'll get a lot of drought, higher sun angles. They'll start to see wildfires in maybe late spring. But with the monsoon rains moving in the summertime, sometimes they'll get really substantial flooding on top of these areas that recently were in drought and wildfire. You can almost think of it as too much of a good thing. I was very impressed by the work they're doing at the University of New Mexico. I met the engineering group there that's monitoring these floods and really monitoring what's happening on the landscape. What impressed me so much is that they have undergrad and grad students not only going out to measure the water levels and the runoff, but they're actually building their own sensors. It's a very hands-on program that they're doing there in Albuquerque. And they're also doing a ton of outreach, scientific outreach to K-12 students, where they're really engaging with a lot of K-12 students, teaching them about the latest science. So I was very impressed by the work they're doing there at the University of New Mexico. Of course, New Mexico is such an interesting state. I decided, hey, why not stay out a few more days? There's all kinds of strange things that happen out there in New Mexico. I stumbled across this old historic town called Santa Rosa. It's an old railroad town. It's on historic Route 66. I met the local historian, Dan Flores, very colorful guy in a very colorful town. And he confirmed for me they have this history of terrible floods following really bad droughts, the worst of which happened in 1937, where they went from a really horrific catastrophic drought right to the worst floods in that region's history. Really interesting conversation I had with him, and we did a podcast. And of course, if you're out in New Mexico, you have to enjoy the amazing food, especially the red and green chili. It's everywhere, even on this Subway sub. Of course, they're going to throw green chili on there for you. Everywhere I went, I was having the red and green chili. And we actually did 3 podcasts from this trip, podcast number 35, 36, and 37. getting into the local history. Podcast 36 was all about the students there at the University of New Mexico and the innovative work they're doing. And then podcast 37 about the impacts of extreme weather and drought and floods and all of that on New Mexico's chili pepper industry. So it was a really interesting experience. I call it 3 trips in one. That was 2 years ago in New Mexico. Experience number 7, Hurricane Ian in September 2022. I know a lot of you, especially if you're insurance adjusters or work in the extreme weather or natural disaster industry at all, you were impacted, and a lot of you were visiting and on the ground in the impact zone in Southwest Florida from Hurricane Ian. It was a terribly catastrophic storm. We know more than 100 fatalities. It was extremely costly storm as well. A lot of storm surge and wind impacts in areas like Fort Myers Beach down to Naples. That area was hit very hard from this Category 4 hurricane. I was located in Punta Gorda in a parking garage right where the eye came right overhead of my location. I like to get in these disaster zones really the day or two before they hit. You see all kinds of innovations. This is a mobile flood barrier that they put in front of elevators to keep the salt water out if they had a storm surge in Punta Gorda. This is just a still picture. The video is exceptional. We were observing sustained winds in the low 130s. That's Category 4 winds right there in Punta Gorda, obviously parts of Fort Myers and over through other areas in the region. We're really getting, like Sanibel Island, a lot of places got tremendous wind and tremendous flood damage. What amazed me was the day after getting hit by Category 4 winds, just going around Punta Gorda and seeing a lot of homes that were relatively untouched by these tremendous wind speeds. We saw a lot of homes that actually fared very well. Others did not fare as well. So if you were not really built to sustain these types of winds, the destruction looked more like this. But what really impressed me about this storm, this area was hit by Hurricane Charlie 18 years earlier. Charlie, also a Cat 4 hurricane. And so a lot of people built back stronger, built to a better code and just a better building practices from both their practices and their materials so that they could withstand another Charlie. When Ian came along 18 years later, a lot of homes did surprisingly well. The reason this hits the top 10 for me is it showed me you can really build for anything if you build well enough and you have enough foresight to know the disasters your community faces and really how you may have to build even above code to really endure those most extreme events. I'm really interested in coastal flooding as well. I went down to the harbor during the halftime show of the I Passage. And this is, you can see on this pole, usually the salt water is about 6 feet deep there. It all was pushed out of Charlotte Harbor in Punta Gorda. I was fascinated by these boats on their side. These boats are usually in 6, 7, 8 feet of water. Along the way, I noticed a lot of movement in the sediment there at the harbor bottom. So I went over to see what was going on, and there were a lot of fish stranded in the bottom of Charlotte Harbor during the eye of Hurricane Ian. Of course, about that time, and usually I'm not actually that much of a risk taker, but I started sinking very, very quickly into the sediment of Charlotte Harbor, and this is what my legs looked like when I got out. Let me remind you, this is in the eye of a Cat 4 hurricane. So my advice for you, if you're doing any storm chasing, any field adjusting, don't go into the harbor or a bay during the eye of a Cat 4 hurricane. That should be obvious. I probably shouldn't have gone out there. My curiosity got the best of me. I was able to wash off this muck, get back into the parking garage with about 10 minutes to spare before we got hammered by those really strong 130 to 135 mile an hour winds on the backside. That is experience number 7 of the GeoTrek, of our top 10 experiences with GeoTrek. Experience number 6, West Virginia and the government eyes inside Roberts Tech Antiques in Lewisburg. This is on the same trip where I went to the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I spent some time in West Virginia. A lot of you are friends and very familiar with Greg Boso. He's a former state senator of West Virginia. He's a forensic engineer and has done a lot of work with CNC and our partners. I ended up visiting him in his home, and he gave me a really nice overview, again, about sinkholes, caves, and the different natural disasters they face right there in West Virginia. Of course, I wanted to spend some time underground. I went to Lost World Cavern in the eastern end of the state, just seeing these beautiful formations, again, these are limestone rich areas where water has dissolved the limestone and really caused a lot of spaces to open up underground. Where these spaces reach the ground level, you can get these sinkholes. We talked about what happened at the National Corvette Museum. This is a sinkhole that opened up in Hinton, West Virginia, underneath the police station. That's pretty much a total loss. They're going to have to destroy that building. Well, what I learned in this time in West Virginia is that there are a lot of natural processes that cause these areas to open up underground, but there are also many man-made processes for opening up and spending time underground as well. For one, mining, like coal mining, is very historic and very common thing in West Virginia. But also, I learned along the way there are a lot of secret bunkers and things that have been opened up secretively underground to hide people or to store people. Maybe the most famous of it is the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. So back in 1962, Congress instructed the Greenbrier to create a Cold War bunker underneath this resort in West Virginia. The bunker could sustain the lives of 535 members of Congress in case something like a nuclear fallout or something like that from a Cold War nuclear attack in Washington, D.C. This was built and was really there for about 30 years secretively underneath the Greenbrier Resort. It was classified until 1992 when an article came out in the Washington Post calling attention to it. And since then, it has not been classified. It's a tourist attraction today where you can actually go down and visit the bunker underneath the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. So anyway, with this in mind and other stories I was hearing about secretive bunkers and a lot of government surveillance and all these secrets in West Virginia, I was walking through the streets of Lewisburg, West Virginia, and I came across Robert's Antiques. And so I went in there and started talking to them and did a podcast interview with locals there about what it's like to live in a place with a lot of caves and sinkholes. And these government stories of government surveillance started coming out. And so that was really surprising to me. I wasn't expecting that. And the owners there at Robert's Antiques said the government's all over the place. They're constantly doing surveillance. And they said, if you don't believe me, you can go into our back room and see this chandelier that the government's put up with these big eyes to do surveillance on our clients. I was like, what in the world are they talking about? So I went back, and sure enough, there's this chandelier in the back of Robert's Antiques where they're doing government surveillance. The owners there said, a lot of our clients are very wealthy or very influential. They're not that far as the crow flies from Washington, D.C. And so their take is that the government kind of wants to know who's in there and what's happening. And so they put up this surveillance chandelier. The reason I love this story is that I had limited time in West Virginia and Kentucky. I really wanted to get to Mammoth Cave National Park, the world's largest discovered caverns. But that said, 600,000 people visit Mammoth Cave every year. There are probably thousands of YouTube videos. If I went to Mammoth Cave, I'd just be another one of these thousands of videos. Instead, I opted to go to Lewisburg, West Virginia, a town I had never heard of, and interact with these locals. And I ended up stumbling across all these interesting stories that you won't find anywhere else. And that's why this makes the top 10 and is so high, because with GeoTrek, we're always looking for these unique angles and these unique stories that are not covered by the mainstream media and are not covered really by any other sources. Well, yeah, that brings us to our number 5 experience over in the Sahara Desert. So I took an international trip this last year to the Sahara Desert, to Morocco. And boy, if you've never been to the Sahara Desert, it is exotic. It is beautiful. One of the most beautiful landscapes I've ever seen. I'll give you a map here. This is Morocco. I flew into Casablanca, and the geographical setup's a lot like California, with a cold ocean current there on the coast, a big mountain range. Once you get east and southeast of the big mountains, it's very, very dry, and you get to the desert. So, of course, if you're in the Sahara Desert, you have to get your camel picture there. I was riding camels around and got to know young Mohammed, who's a camel guide with a smiling camel there. And along the way, I began to ask questions. How in the world do these people live in one of the harshest environments on the planet? The temperatures routinely get up into the 120s in the summer, but yet they do it without air conditioning and many times without electricity. How in the world have they adapted so well to their environment that they can do that? So what I found was they've really built for this. And one of the ways they do it, they build these old historic communities like beehives. And really, there's all these tunnels and like dark tunnels underground that protect you from the blazing sun. They not only protect you as you're walking, but homes are actually built into these tunnels. So this is a photograph here of one of these tunnels with homes built into the side. You can see where people live here in this tunnel system that really looks a lot in a way like a beehive. The walls are exceptionally thick to keep out the heat. You can see here walls that are 3 feet thick. And this is an old Kasbah. This is an old city that was built over 600 years ago. Part of it is falling down now, but look at how thick these walls are. Tremendously thick walls on this old Kasbah in the Sahara Desert of Morocco. So not only do they build thick walls, another innovation that they've done is they've created these open air courtyards with really high roofs. So that keeps out the direct sunlight. It gives them natural light so they don't need to use electricity. It also allows the heat to escape up through this hole in the center of the courtyard. I came across many of these. This is not just a historic museum, y'all. This is used. People live and work here in the Sahara Desert. Amazing landscape, amazing built environment. And you can see this courthouse here where they're actually using it. Artisans are using these courtyards to make art, display them. It hardly ever rains, so you can just leave your art out under the open air. Here's another courtyard that they use. Again, these are used by artisans. They have expert craftsmen. They do a lot of wood engraving and woodwork, a lot of pottery work as well, and just tremendous amount of art. What really hit me, I expected to find people holding on for dear life and eking out an existence. They're actually thriving there in the Sahara Desert, not only living, but making a lot of art and really doing a lot of meaningful work there. I was blown away. Here's another open air courtyard, and look into the walls here. You can see small openings. So they also have a lot of small windows to let in natural light, but the windows in their built environment are very small. So here's another edge of the Kasbah. So this is like an old city. This is not just one building. This is the wall of a larger city. Look at how small these windows are, though. Here's another one here, very small windows. Windows are not your friend when the temperature is 127 degrees outside. So they have very small windows to allow some light in, but not to allow a lot of heat. It's interesting to me because we have a similar climate in the United States in the desert Southwest, but we build very differently, right? So we tend to have large garage doors that are not very thick and really big windows. We, in a sense, you could say we have more resources here. We just blast the air conditioning and have a $400, $500 air conditioning bill in the summer in the parts of our country. In general, what I think is that they've adapted better to their environment, and they're building in a very special way that enables them to build really without air conditioning, which is just amazing. Again, another very small window here, and you'll notice on this slide that you can also see rugs not only out of the window but off of the roof. How in the world are you getting rugs on your roof? Well, it's a place where you may wash your rugs and shake them out because the roofs are very flat. So people also sleep on their roofs at night. So the inside of the building at night is hotter than the roof. So people just have flat roofs and they sleep on their roofs at night. Unfortunately, the region is really suffering under a 9-year drought. They usually get a little bit of rain in the wintertime and bigger rains and mountain snows in the Atlas Mountains to the north. All of those rains and snows have dried up over the last 9 years. The palm trees are doing very poorly. The trees are dying or already dead. And this is a big problem. The Kasbah that I was visiting, 3/4 of the people have already moved out. And so drought is a big problem. They have water underground. A well in these areas may cost $2,000 and the people just don't have that money. And so a lot of times people are abandoning where they've lived for generations. But just when you think it's abandoned and it's a ghost town, you see kids zoom by on a bike. So it's not a ghost town yet. They're doing an amazing job of adapting to their environment, just under some of the harshest conditions for survival on the planet. Well, here we are at experience number 4. We're going to do one more experience and then take a short break. Experience number 4, seasonal hurricane forecasting from Colorado State University. So they've been doing this great work there at CSU. When you hear about seasonal hurricane forecasting, we often think about Phil Klotzbach and Bill Gray at CSU. That Bill Gray really got this work started in the 80s, and Phil Klotzbach carries it on today. We're always excited to hear what they have to say about the seasonal hurricane forecast. And a lot of this they're doing through technology, especially satellite climatology, where we look at ocean temperatures, where we see the reds and the orange and the yellows. We have warmer than normal sea surface temperatures. Blue are colder than normal. This is the shot from this week. We can see a warm Atlantic and a warm Pacific. And what's really interesting as we look ahead to this next year, most of the models are showing a warm Atlantic, but the Pacific is forecast to cool dramatically. Now, it won't quite look like a sharp rectangle. It'll be the vast region should generally be cooler than normal, but most of the models now pointing to a cold Pacific this hurricane season. When you get a cold equatorial Pacific and a warm main development region in the Atlantic, typically that means a very active hurricane season. That's how things are looking right now, but it's a little bit too early to tell. A lot can change between now and August and September. Look for the first official forecast to come out from CSU on April 4th. That'll be at the National Tropical Weather Conference in South Padre Island. I'll be there with Phil and many of our other colleagues, but that's when the first official forecast will come out in around 2 months from CSU. But it's looking right now like we may see a cold Pacific, a warm Atlantic. That typically ends up being a very active season. Lastly, before we get to our break, I wanted to share this last thing. Phil and I did a podcast after South Padre Island last year. Phil and I were in the airport, and he told me that the seasonal forecasting happened almost by accident. Back in the 80s, Bill Gray and the research team, they had this stack of papers from reconnaissance aircraft where they had flown into hurricanes to collect data. They printed this out. They had this stack of really important papers, and the papers disappeared. They think in retrospect, maybe a janitor threw them out. But the main research project they were planning to go into was deleted. It was disappeared. It was thrown away. And so episode 72 of the GeoTrek podcast, Phil Klotzbach is our special guest. It's titled The Janitor Threw Out the Data, the backstory of seasonal forecasting with Phil Klotzbach. Essentially, with the reconnaissance data thrown away, they needed to quickly find a new area of research. They got into seasonal hurricane forecasting, and the rest, my friends, is history. We're going to take a little break now. I think we've covered our bottom 7, and then next we're going to turn to our top 3.
All right, thank you, Hal. So we are going to go ahead and do a new segment this year on Claims Corner. It is called our IYOW segment. IYOW. There you go. IYOW. So in your own words, this segment is brought to you by Blue Leopard Agency, a marketing agency that's redefining success in the digital age. Visit blueleopardagency.com today to discover how they can tailor a marketing plan that's as unique as your brand. Don't wait. Take the first step toward marketing success right now. We also encourage our viewers to answer this question as well in their own words in the comments, and we might read a few of the best answers that we have. So, question for Hal. In your own words, what is the main reason people get blindsided by incoming extreme weather?
We lost him again.
Did we lose his audio?
Lost his audio. So the main reason
that people get blindsided by extreme weather.
Is it? Can I say just one word?
One word, in your own words, one sentence, one thought.
What do you think, Mary? What do you think, Mary?
Climate change. They don't understand it.
Okay, I can see that. I'm thinking more on the lines of indestructible.
Yeah.
They think they can do everything. They think they don't have to worry about it. Oh, good, indestructible.
Yep.
And they don't pay attention to the environment around them, what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've experienced this storm 100 times. I'm good.
Yep.
I did that once.
Yep.
Hurricane Katrina. Went through a whole bunch of storms and great. And then all of a sudden Hurricane Katrina comes along. And even though it was in Louisiana and we're in Alabama, I was like, I am never going to stay for another storm again.
Yeah.
Just because it was a lot worse than people expected it to be. And so I think people think that. And it's kind of like a pride thing, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I don't want to leave. I'm good at this. And they don't pay attention to actually the true forecasting is not really the right word, because I think the forecasting the way it is now is kind of deceive a little bit. It doesn't really tell you what's going to happen around you. Everybody focuses on the cone, like on a hurricane.
Yep.
Here's the cone. Here's the cone. Everybody focuses on where the tornado tracks are and stuff like that. But where the severe weather is supposedly going to happen, but then you have those spinoffs, and you have other things that affect it. So I think that's what a lot of people don't I think that's why a lot of people get blindsided by it.
Yeah. I think if I had to put it into a couple words, I would say past experiences. To your point, I think they think I've lived here for 50 years. We've never had a flood or hurricanes never affected us. We survived or, withstood this hurricane, 15 years ago and 7 years ago. So this one won't be any different. And as we know, the climate changes every day. To Mary's point, climate changes, it's real. It does happen. The environment changes. The waters change as far as temperature. And, storms are getting relatively more extreme as the years go by.
Yeah.
They're getting worse, and I just want to say that I don't think that they use their resources too. There's so many different resources out there that are available to us, and we don't ignore it. If it doesn't come across, we don't listen to it. We ignore it. It comes across social media, then it's a big thing. But if you're, if you don't watch the news, if you don't use the websites that are available when we know that something's coming, then we're not prepared, and then we run into a situation like Katrina.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, and people try to evacuate, and then something happens, and then nothing happens. I mean, it's like, we got the storm coming along, and then it goes the other way, and nobody evacuates, and then it does it again. They're like, we're good.
Yep.
Right.
It's not going to affect me.
Yep.
And then also you wait too long, and all of a sudden the storm comes in, and it comes right. And I mean, there's too many people in this world now.
Yep.
It's hard to evacuate.
It's
I mean,
too
back
late.
in early, a long time ago, you could just get a car and drive, and we're seeing a couple people on the interstate now. It's like, okay. 4 o'clock in the morning, there's 1,000 people in the interstate.
That's right.
So I think that has a lot to do with it as well as just the number of people. And there's this, it was a rumor that when Ian was making its way up, they didn't put out any evacuation notice right because they were afraid people were going to get on the road, get into a situation where they were stuck on the road, and the storm comes in and affects them. So they're better off being in their house at that point, which, it's unfortunate. People lost their lives. There's a lot of destruction from it. But it's the alternative. You get out on the road, and next thing you know, you're in traffic jams, and the storm hits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a matter of what battle do you face at that point?
Yep. I think people are dependent on what they hear on the news as well.
Yeah.
Instead of taking it into their own hands and saying, hey, this is probably what's best for me.
Yeah.
They're waiting on somebody else to give them the answer, to give them the advice on what should we do? Should we evacuate? Do we stick it out?
So we lost him again. Is he back on? Yeah. Hal, you good?
Hey, y'all, I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, we were waiting. We thought we lost you. Go ahead.
No,
Answer that one for us.
Oh, you were talking about what blindsides people the most?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really ignorance of just not knowing your history. Either you never knew it or you knew it and forgot it. I think that's the biggest thing. Kind of like Murphy was saying, just not knowing what's happened in your area maybe 60, 70, 80 years ago. So a lot of times people are buying a house in a very hazard prone area, and they just don't know the history there.
Yep. All right. Top 3.
Let's do it, y'all. I'm
All right.
going to just head back here, share my screen
We
again.
got
But
about
let's
5
do
minutes.
top
So
3 here.
Let's roll through them.
1 second here.
You still there? I think we lost him. Oh, wow. Number 3. I think we lost you again, Hal. Your internet's going in and out. All right, number 3.
It's out on the ground there.
There we are.
In Carbon, Texas, just seeing these wildfires, tremendous fires there sweeping over the landscape. This was about 2 years ago in 2022. Unfortunately, some of those fires really got into populated areas, places like Carbon, Texas, a small community, but many of the houses were burned in these fires in 2022. I was going along through Carbon, Texas, seeing these houses that were burned out. In this one neighborhood, almost all of the houses had burned. And what I noticed is this one house did not burn. And that seemed really odd because in this block, every house had burned, but this one red house. And so I started asking the question, why in the world did this one red house not burn when all the others did? And I actually interviewed the homeowner, and this is the best picture I have for it. I should have gotten a better picture right behind the house because I did not realize the significance of this story until a little bit later. But what happened here is when the fires swept across the landscape and they were moving like this, really from right to left, basically. It was a grass fire. And so the trees mostly survived. The grass burned up, and the grass is how it spread. But the homeowner said the morning of the fire, they had a front end loader come in and kind of tear up their backyard to fix a utility line. And so all the grass was gone. And I asked the question, you mean to say that your home was saved because there was no grass in your yard on that day? And they said that's exactly what happened. The fire moved rapidly across the grass. We did not have any grass because the front end loader tore it up. And so our house was saved. I thought this was really interesting because when we have high fire risk in the southern plains in Texas, the National Weather Service will issue a red flag warning, or maybe they'll issue a map showing elevated and critical fire levels in places like Texas and Oklahoma. And what's interesting is there's a real pattern to this. So the way it usually happens is you have a storm system come through, especially in the springtime, warm, moist air out ahead of it. You see a cold front there in blue, but between the moist air and the cold front, you have something called a dry line. It's the yellow line here, the yellow front is basically near San Angelo in this map. It's bringing in some very hot and very dry air from the Mexican desert with a strong wind from the southwest. Here's another view of what it looks like. Again, you get these really strong, hot, dry winds blowing in from the southwest. And that's the direction that this fire came in. About 11 years before, they also had another fire in this community that approached as well from the southwest. Got me thinking, if this is what your schematic looks like on your home and your grass and your street, and these fires are coming in from the southwest, what if we mandated, or what if people just built so that they have a patio or something to the southwest of their home? It could really protect their home from future fires. Imagine if their homeowner's insurance had a reduced rate if they took the grass away from the southwest side of the house, making them less vulnerable to burning from wildfires. I just wanted to share this. If you're a field adjuster, if you're a field scientist, and you see anything in the field that looks strange, like all of these houses had burned, but this one house, please take a minute, talk to the homeowner, take some photographs, investigate that story. Sometimes the most interesting things we find in science just happen from when you're out there on the landscape and you say, this is really odd. There's a reason why we have a hiking boot in the GeoTrek logo. We like to get out there on the ground, and this is where we discover a lot of these things. Well, y'all, let's move into the final two, the top two experiences from the GeoTrek project over the last 3 years. The epic snow in California, Sierra Nevada mountains. These were tremendous snow loads that I encountered last spring in California. Y'all, they got unbelievable amount of snow. A lot of houses were just completely buried. Some people decided to put a walkway in on the side of their house that's protected from the heavy snow. Stop signs were buried. Mailboxes were buried, so people had to write their address on snowbanks. Not only that, this house has 16, 17 feet of snow on the deck. Utility line is in the snowbank. That's a problem because when the snow freezes and thaws, it can start gripping these utility lines, and a lot of utility lines had fallen down. Not only did they have icicles, they had ice waterfalls coming off of these houses, and a lot of roofs were collapsing because of the weight of the heavy, wet snow. Of course, I'm adventurous. I ended up getting up there on a roof and shoveling a bit, seeing what this is all about. The interesting thing, though, is I assumed you want to get all of this snow off your roof. In some cases, you want to keep the snow on your roof, especially if you have close neighbors or it's dangerous to have a snow slide. And so what I learned there from doing a podcast with an engineering group, podcast number 70, The Value of Local Knowledge, Building for Epic Snow Loads in the Sierras, I learned that, you can really, again, build for anything. In this case, they were building for tremendous snow loads in the Sierra. This engineering team said, hey, do you want to come with us skiing? And I said, no, I have work to do all day. And they said, well, we have a free ski pass. So here I am an hour later with this group. Again, we were up there in the Sierras. This is Ken Whittle's engineering group. They explained all about how they engineer for heavy snow loads. And I ended up getting a little bit of snowboarding in there with those engineers. Another little bit of fun we had there, I took up my measuring stick. This is a yardstick. Did not do me very good when you have snowbanks 35 feet high. But what I saw was interesting, and I want to leave you with this, is that with these heavy snow loads on the roofs, a lot of people were saying, we have roofs collapsing, we have lives in danger. We never could have built for this. We never could have prepared for this. We've never seen anything like this before. We've been here since 1985. We've never seen snow like this. What I thought was interesting is UCal Berkeley has the Central Sierra Snow Lab. They've been there taking measurements since 1946. And last season, although it was massive, 63 feet of snow, it was not their number one season. Their number one season was 1951-52 with 68 feet of snow. A lot of people just never knew that history of how much snow can fall in this area. What I thought was really interesting is getting blindsided by heavy snow. It was the same, really, I don't want to really use the word ignorance, but kind of a lack of knowledge of your history. It was the same thing we see in flood prone regions where people build in an area, they flood, they say, I've been here for 40 years. We never had flooding this high. They didn't know about that flood that happened 80, 90, or 100 years ago. Well, y'all, here we are at the number one experience in 3 years of the GeoTrek project. Let's have a little drum roll, if you will. The number one experience for me was an easy choice. It was the aftermath of the Moroccan earthquake in September of 2023. Massive earthquake in central Morocco last September. I spent time on the ground this December in the earthquake zone. Y'all, just tremendous damage. I had never seen earthquake damage like this before. There were unfortunately a lot of fatalities, about 2,800 deaths. This was a 6.8 shallow earthquake in an area that hasn't observed earthquakes in the previous 150 years. The people I met there were just tremendous, very sweet people. I made friends with a lot of them. The woman in the middle of this photograph, her name is Hafida. She and her family took me in, and she reenacted. This is where she was when the earthquake struck, ready to open up her front door. If it hit 10 to 15 seconds later, she would have been crushed inside that building. So she was very fortunate that she was outside that door instead of inside. These are very sweet, hospitable people. They fed me. They did my laundry. There's a GeoTrek t-shirt. Amazing people there. Unfortunately, they're living in tents. They're not having a good situation. Almost all of the homes were destroyed. And that might look fun. That might look adventurous, but it's actually extremely cold. They're at about 5,000 feet. At nighttime, there's ice on the tents. I was freezing and shivering inside. Again, they're hospitable people that invited me into their tent there in the refugee camp, if you will, and fed me and shared what limited food they had. They were trying to push the best of their food onto me. They're very hospitable. Y'all, I was very, very moved by this. It was very heavy. The media has long moved on. They've forgotten about these people. Nobody really knows about them, but they're suffering. They're living in tents with really, no path forward for a lot of them. This was a very heavy story on my heart. I was actually crying when I left, and I started sharing this story on social media, and people started asking, is there something we can do to help? Is there some way that we can be involved? And there is. You see how this tent back there has it's very thin fabric, and it's kind of crumbled. You can actually build a bamboo rectangle, and if you do that, you can actually hang blankets and insulation on the inside of these bamboo structures. One structure costs $50. And so a lot of our GeoTrek supporters and followers said, how can we help? How can we be involved? At Christmas week, we were actually able to raise $1,100. This was enough for 22 bamboo frames that'll keep 22 families warm this winter. For me, that was Merry Christmas. I was so excited. I was so excited that we could help these people in some small way by raising money that was not really part of our initial goal with doing this international GeoTrek work. But in the end, we were able to help a lot of families out. And for that gets my number one GeoTrek experience over the last 3 years. Y'all, as we wrap up, a huge thank you to CNC Catastrophe and National Claims, who supported and really helped the GeoTrek project prosper. And of course, our staff, Senneth Baker, Ashley Anderson, Jeremiah Long, Amy Wilkins, and Braxton Brown. This is my contact information. Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call, or send me a text. Again, check out GeoTrek at geo-trek.com. Y'all, thanks so much for hanging in there. I know we had some tech problems today, but really appreciate everyone's attention to look back at these 3-year anniversary of the GeoTrek project.
Hal, thank you very much. Love the top 10, especially number one. That is very important. And I don't know if you do this, if these fundraising like that is often, but if people want to get involved in the GeoTrek project, how do they get involved? What should they do?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked. There's an online community on Facebook called GeoTrek the Community. And we're posting there. And this is where people, that fundraiser was just organic. We were not even planning on doing it. But as people saw these generous people that wanted to give me their food and do without, they're suffering, people said, come on, how can we help? And so this was just an organic thing. And I think that's how it's going to stay. Our focus is very much helping people build better, helping people understand the science better. But along the way, we often come in touch with people that are in need. Follow us along and interact online. I expect in the future there'll be some more of these organic fundraisers or ways that we can help people out.
Good information.
Awesome.
That's an awesome
That's
way
good
to
stuff.
end the top 10.
Yeah, definitely. So there's no other questions on our chat. So I do have one quick question. It's from Murphy. He wants to know why his episode was not number 1.
Well,
and why he didn't even make the top 10.
Everybody knows that was number 1. This was really numbers 2 through 11.
Yes, there we go. Okay, so all right, so there's your answer, Murphy.
You're
So,
too kind.
all right, I know we ran behind a little bit of time here, but again, everything that you went over, great episodes. There's a couple of them that I will definitely go back and listen to again. I've sat down and listened to the one. I'm surprised the one about seaweed didn't make the top 10. I thought that was really interesting. The issue with the seaweed out there. But again, if you want to follow Hal, know where to go. GeoTrek. Look at Spotify, all the podcast sites out there. Definitely. And if you want to follow more about what CNC does in Claims Corner, go to our YouTube channel. And again, subscribe. Hit that little bell link there. And Hal, thanks again for being on.
Thank you. Big thank you, Hal. We appreciate it.
Have anything y'all want to throw out there before we close this one out?
Nope. This
No.
is my first episode,
Hey.
and it was great. I learned such, great information about GeoTrek, and I enjoyed being on here today.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing. We will be back in 2 weeks for episode 2, Tarping Nightmares with Night Solutions. It's actually an episode that Mary and I did. We were actually up on the roof in our training house here in Mobile, Alabama. We clearly made it safely because we're here today, but it was a great episode, so we're super excited about that one.
So with that, we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Have a great week. Appreciate y'all tuning in.
All right, see you, everybody.
Time.